Welcome, everybody, to another episode, live stream of the Brickyard podcast. We're here to go over every game that happened throughout week 5 of the NFL. We'll be going over the world famous worst top 5 documents will be revealed later on in the show. And we'll also be going over all the latest news. Robert Saleh, Mr. Clean, out as the New York Jets head coach. Drake May taking over the helm for the New England Patriots. But first thing we must talk about, Thursday Night Football, one of the greatest Thursday Night Football games we've ever seen, and Kirk Cousins going absolute God mode, absolutely perfect in the Falcons and Bucs game on Thursday night. How did you like witnessing God himself step onto the field for the Atlanta Falcons?
I mean, it was a pretty spectacular game. Definitely a early game of the year candidate. I mean, you want to talk about two quarterbacks playing out of their mind, two defenses not really getting a ton of stops. We had the gas station involved, and Bucky Irving, Drake London starting to turn into one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. Maybe a lot of people's fantasy wide receiver number 1 right now. Number 18, Kirk Cousins, and both of these teams just going back and forth throughout this game. And then lo and behold, the person you have run under a bus, the person you have scoffed at before, the person whose name shall be named right now, Darnell Mooney, having a career game, going absolutely berserk for over 30 fantasy points. When he went to the Falcons, you're like, I mean, I guess it's Darnell Mooney. I was like, it could be something there. He was fine in Chicago, but he did have Justin Fields and Mitchell Trubisky throwing him the football. And then out of nowhere, he's coming out here, balling out. He did potentially drop a touchdown that could have iced the game, but I mean, the guy already had 2 touchdowns before that, and the Falcons kicking it in a high gear. And I said this was one of the best 1 and 2 teams at that time. We both picked the Bucs, and it looked like the Bucs were going to get it done, but the Falcons defense didn't get a ton of stops throughout this game. However, they got the biggest sack when it mattered, knocking the Tampa Bay Buccaneers out of field goal range, forcing them to punt. And then Kirk Cousins now making a early MVP case on the Atlanta Falcons. I mean, no one saw this coming. People just thought he was there to collect one last paycheck, but looks like Kirk Cousins cloned himself, updated his software, and now he is Terminator 2 and is
Yeah,
fully
I
here.
think this I don't want to ever hear anybody ever say primetime Kirk ever again, because these last 5 weeks of the season, he has beat the Eagles on a clutch fourth quarter drive. He has gone head to head with the Chiefs, and I know he didn't win that game, but he had a bullshit call that could have resulted in a Chiefs loss or a Falcons win. He marched down the field last week, and then he does it again here in overtime. One of the hardest, most clutchest 1 second down, spikes the ball with 1 second left. Younghoe Koo with an absolute leg just hits an absolute boot, brings it to overtime, and then in overtime scores a touchdown, and he throws for 500 yards. I don't want to hear any more Kirk Cousins slander. And if you look at the stats the last several years with Monday Night Football, he's actually balled out in prime time. So I don't want to hear this nonsense. Kirk Cousins, don't talk about primetime Kirk anymore. It doesn't exist. He's a baller, and he's clutch. He's one of the most clutch quarterbacks in the league at this point. So I don't want to hear that noise. Also, this might be an overreaction, but I'm going to say it anyways. Can we start talking about Kirk Cousins' Hall of Fame case? I'm ready to hear about it, because we've heard nothing but slander. If we're going to put Eli Manning in the Hall of Fame, if we're going to put Phillip Rivers in the Hall of Fame, let's put Kirk Cousins in the Hall of Fame. And I'm here for it. I think 4-time Pro Bowler. He's been good everywhere he's gone. Yeah, he doesn't have the playoff success, but neither does people like Tony Romo and these other guys, Dak Prescott. So I think why not? He's had over 30-plus touchdowns in 4 consecutive seasons. Like, I'm tired of the noise. Kirk Cousins is him. I'm tired of
Who's
all
putting
the
Tony
bullshit.
Romo and Dak Prescott in the Hall of Fame? That's what I want to know. Like, at least Eli Manning won 2 Super Bowls, and Phillip Rivers, I don't know, made a conference championship.
Yeah, but I've heard people talk about Tony Romo in the Hall of Fame, and I
They
feel like
shouldn't
they've
have a
had very
job.
similar careers.
They shouldn't have a job if there are people talking about Tony Romo in the Hall of Fame of all people. I mean, the guy's doing ads for Skechers. What does that tell you?
I've heard it. This is talking about live people who get paid to talk about sports.
I
And I
don't
feel
know,
like his
Jim.
career was pretty similar to Kirk Cousins. And I honestly think Kirk Cousins is a better quarterback because everywhere he's gone, I mean, he's played well for the Falcons for this point. He did pretty well for the Vikings as well. And then even for the Commanders, a franchise that's pretty much consistently dreadful, kept them afloat for some extent. Honestly, yeah, I think Kirk Cousins deserves some praise. And I'm tired of people saying he's not clutch because he's had more game-winning drives in the last 3 years than any other quarterback, even including Patrick Mahomes. So tired of the Kirk Cousins noise. He is clutch. Enough with the noise.
Yeah, he's clutch now, but I feel like his primetime Kirk narrative before was definitely earned. Like it's something he has overcome, but he's shown it time after time again this season. And I feel like it definitely has to come down to coaching and just the weapons he has. Because in Minnesota, he didn't really have the run game the past few years where Dalvin Cook was kind of falling off a little bit. And Minnesota really didn't have a run game. Then he got injured here. And now Atlanta seems like they have a better offensive line. Even though Bijan's not having an amazing year, Tyler Algier is still there, and they have a really solid wide receiver core, but it's not like Atlanta's weapons are much better. But I think just all around the coaching has been better in Atlanta than anywhere that Kirk Cousins has been so far. The fact that he's been able to win like all of these one possession games, which is similar how it was when they made the playoffs in Minnesota with a negative point differential. Like the year they made the playoffs, um, it was negative. Then they lost to the Giants and Daniel Jones. We can't excuse that off of his Hall of Fame case that he lost to Walt Jr. in the playoffs. And then now it's kind of the same thing this year where he's just winning all of these one possession games, but the offense really isn't blowing anybody out. It's kind of just doing whatever it takes to win, which isn't a bad thing because it gives you that
I
close
mean,
game experience when you get to the playoffs, but you actually have to win a playoff game.
well, this game was a battle, though. I mean, threw for 500 yards. Their offense doesn't look bad necessarily by any means. And when they lost to Daniel Jones, I think they lost more to Saquon in that defense more than Daniel Jones. But I think his numbers this year have been good. I don't know if I'd put him in the MVP conversation, but I definitely think that he deserves a little more respect than what people have given him over the last several years because he has been quietly. I don't know if I'd put him at 10, but he's been right around that top 10 quarterback range with his numbers. And I just, the slander that you would hear on Twitter about Kirk Cousins being this worst quarterback of all time, I don't want to hear this noise anymore. Kirk Cousins has proven that he can be clutch in these moments. And he's also proven that he can perform and he can put numbers up. And I don't want to hear the noise anymore. I think Kirk Cousins is good.
Yeah, 500 yards is definitely an incredible game. Do you think this is a blow to Tampa, or do you think they bounce back from this? Because this is a, I felt like this was basically a great way to kick off the start of the real NFL season here in October. Thursday night football, a real divisional battle. Can you see Tampa bouncing back, or do you see this kind of crushing their early season momentum where they've kind of lost to some bad teams to start the year before this?
Yeah, I think their next month is pretty tough. I think that when they face the Falcons again, they win. I have a feeling they're going to split just with how competitive they played. What gave me hope is that Rashad White woke up from his early season struggles. I mean, I think he rushed for like 70 yards, and he was super effective for him, which we haven't really seen that Rashad White yet. Keep in mind that he was pretty solid for them down the stretch last year. If they can beat some of these teams, like I know they face the Chiefs pretty soon, if they can beat a team like the Chiefs or beat a team like the Ravens, who they also face soon, then I'll have more faith. I just have a feeling they're going to have a lot of grind out wins at this point. And then Levante David getting banged up doesn't hurt you. It doesn't really help you either. I don't think they're going to be winning this division, but I still think they're going to be afloat and still be competitive.
Yeah, I could see that. Yeah, I think Tampa's kind of going to be still in that 9 to 10 win range here. Probably a really solid 9-8, similar to where they were last year. And then they also did cut Devin White. Well, the Eagles cut Devin White there, so maybe he returns to Tampa, help him out a
Yeah,
little bit with Levante David getting hurt.
yeah, I hope so. But overall, this was one of the most electric games to watch of the week, and really liked watching these boys ball. Unlike the week that started on Sunday, which was the Dolphins and Patriots game. Well, actually, no. Let's start with the London game. Vikings and
Boy.
Jets. This one, London. We saw the Vikings move to 5-0, and we saw the Jets just completely do Jets things, and also cost Mr. Clean his job. Robert Saleh removed after this game. Aaron Rodgers throws 3 picks. Can't get anything done on the ground. Complete sloppy mess of a game. Thoughts on this London game? Our first of the lucky for us London experience that we all face each year. These games are always cursed, man. I don't like these London games.
I mean, yeah, being a fan of football, though, I did like watching this game. It was something that was on. I could chill out early Sunday morning and watch this game, and I thought it was actually pretty entertaining. So the Vikings jump out. Justin Jefferson and Sauce Gardner was an absolute battle in this game, and I wanted to see the Vikings get tested where they would get pushed in back-to-back weeks where you saw them almost blow it to the Green Bay Packers, and I wanted to see them put in an uncomfortable position again and what would happen there. And then Aaron Rodgers works some magic and then makes this a close game versus the Minnesota Vikings in the second half, and then has a drive at the end of it that could have ended up winning the game. And then who other than Stephon Gilmore coming up with the game-sealing pick, which was absolutely incredible. You think Dallas could use a corner like that on their team? Absolutely. And then Brian Flores' defense stepping up, and now some people are putting this Vikings defense as one of the best defenses in the league right now. And then we saw Sam Darnold in this game, and we saw exactly what he should be for this team, which is someone who, if you have a turnover, that's fine. Just don't have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 turnovers and see ghosts in this game, and just remain calm. Let your defense do what they do and then hold us afloat, and they'll be able to win us this game under Brian Flores. And that's exactly what happened. I think the loss of Aaron Jones going down and getting injured in this game is going to be pretty big for the Vikings, because I thought that was their weakness that they addressed coming into this year. So we'll see the status of his health. But overall, I like seeing the Vikings get into a close battle and come out on top. And I think they really earned that 5-0 status. And for the Jets, this is kind of the same Jets team we've seen over the past few years. And you have Aaron Rodgers coming off a major injury in this game. And then Devontae Adams was talking about how it took him 3 years to really click with Aaron Rodgers before him and Aaron Rodgers had that rapport that he had with Jordy Nelson. Well, it turns out he doesn't really have it with anyone on this team. And when you come into the season without an offensive line and an old quarterback and Mike Williams, who was banished from the Chargers, who have some receivers, but they still really don't have any elite talent on the outside. Lad McConkey's coming along. Somehow Quentin Johnson was able to be fixed this year, but they're still lacking a little bit of talent on offense. And it was a defense where you held them to 23 points. That's good, but this is the Jets team I expected to see coming into the year. But Aaron Rodgers turning the ball over 3 times, pretty uncharacteristic of him when he was winning those MVPs. It was because of how safe he was with the ball here. I think he was looking for a pass interference, but probably just a really good play from Stephon Gilmore at the end of the day.
Yeah, definitely some good plays from them. I want to touch on the Vikings too, because I think what gave me hope about them this game is that we're not seeing, like, Sam Darnold didn't have the greatest of games, right? Completed about 50% of his passes, threw a pick, but ultimately he played relatively clean football outside of that interception. The running game wasn't super crazy, but they were still able to put up 23 points. And Justin Jefferson still got his. Jordan Addison got open on a few plays as well. Didn't play their best game, and they still won. I think that gives me hope for them. For the Jets, like, you're right when you say, like, this is kind of what we expected. The Jets, I mean, their defense is always going to be good, right? They have great players everywhere on that team. But at the same time, you're relying on an offense that was not good last year. And they thought, oh, well, it's probably just the quarterback. No, Aaron Rodgers comes back from a serious injury, and he is still banged up now. I've heard that he's working with a low ankle sprain, which has been hurting him too. So I mean, he's still probably a little banged up as well. And their offensive line's terrible. Like he's getting sacked 3, 4, 5 times a game for a guy who's going to be 41 in 3 months. Like this is a team that expected all these different things when they got Aaron Rodgers, thinking he was going to bring them, and they were so close to being in the Super Bowl window. And when we were talking about them acquiring Aaron Rodgers, we said, like, you guys are not as close to making a Super Bowl as you think, and he's not going to bring you to that promised land. Now it looks like that's going to be more and more true. They fire Robert Saleh, that's a whole nother thing, but I just think that their move for Aaron Rodgers was questionable then, and now with how this team is projecting to be, it's a mess for them. Honestly, they're in a really shitty spot overall.
Yeah, I mean, just trade like Aaron Rodgers signing with you doesn't suddenly change the fact that you're a really poorly and inefficiently run franchise. Like people in the media that were hyping up this team, I don't understand why they still have jobs. Like, okay, you're fanboying over your team, like it's sports, it's different than politics, but the fact that you're going out there saying that, yeah, this is a Super Bowl contender, like have you watched Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs over the past over a half decade here? And then this is the same Jets franchise that hasn't been able to put together a Super Bowl caliber team since Rex Ryan was the head coach there. And then Mark Sanchez was the quarterback, got to 2 conference championships under him. And that's the best you looked here. But this still wasn't a dynamic roster outside of the defense coming into the year. You can't rely on just Garrett Wilson. Garrett Wilson is a very talented receiver. He's one of the better receivers in this league, but is he a Tyreek Hill? Is he AJ Brown? Does he bring that amount of game-changing value as a Justin Jefferson? At this point, no, he doesn't. And it takes time to build rapport with someone like Aaron Rodgers, just like Devontae Adams was talking about, and we need to see that actually play out. So I never thought this was going to be a playoff team or a Super Bowl caliber team. And then Aaron Rodgers, surprise, surprise, a quarterback in their 40s is injured and doesn't look like how they were in their prime. And the only one to do it was Tom Brady. Like at some point, the anomaly is not the norm. Why was the expectation for Aaron Rodgers to look like his prime self when we saw Peyton Manning, Ben Roethlisberger, Drew Brees all take that step back here, and people are just expecting the same old Aaron Rodgers. And Aaron Rodgers does have some throws once in a while, but he's not the same quarterback that we saw 5 years ago when he won back-to-back MVPs. He's just not the same guy anymore. And also, we're looking at Green Bay right now, much better organization, much better run team, much better talent on offense.
Yeah, and honestly, if you look back at Aaron Rodgers last year with the Packers, the writing was on the wall. And for the Packers, because they're a good run organization and they already had their backup plan in place, like they had when Aaron Rodgers took over the helm, was you saw the writing on the wall, and rather than just bask in the past, they moved on. And for the Jets, they did the complete opposite. They said, well, we've never been good. Our best quarterback we've ever had is either Joe Namath or Ryan Fitzpatrick, who played for half the league at one point. That's basically been their history and their history of patheticness. And this is also a Jets team that's been a graveyard for the NFL. I mean, think about it. LaDainian Tomlinson, Brandon Marshall, Eric Decker. The list goes on. And I could name a bunch of other players that went to the Jets. Santonio Holmes, all these different team players who went to the Jets and their career was over. Matt Forte,
Eric
Le'Veon
Decker.
Bell. Like, I know Le'Veon Bell played for more teams, but that Jets contract could not have been any worse. He was the peak of his powers on the Steelers. Takes 1 year off, goes to the Jets, and he forgets how to run. His legs turn into jellyfish. I don't know what happens there. So going to the Jets, I don't know if it's East Rutherford. I don't know if it's just the franchise at large. Not like the Giants don't have their own curses, but it seems like this Jets team has a special curse on them where you go to the Jets and you're in your later half of your career is over. They did the same thing to Brett Favre. Brett Favre looked terrible at the Jets. Then as soon as they leave, if they have a chance to recover, they look pretty good. Now, I don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to play anywhere else, but it's a graveyard for NFL talent. They go to the Jets to die. And unfortunately, we're going to see a top 5 quarterback of all time go there to die. We're not going to see him ever win or even make the playoffs at this point again.
Yeah, and then there were talks of firing Nathaniel Hackett. And clearly we all know it was Matt LaFleur, and Nathaniel Hackett really wasn't doing too much in Green Bay, but he just wanted someone there, which is a problem when your head coach is a defensive guy. And that has shown throughout the year because their offense has not looked good, hasn't looked interesting. The best their offense looked was versus the New England Patriots and Adam Lazard getting 2 touchdowns. That's when your offense was like, oh, so dynamic. Look what they did to a bottom team in the league on Thursday Night Football. Like, are you kidding me? Like, that's the time. And now Robert Sala's put in his time with the Jets, and it's been a little bit now. And he's definitely made this team better over the past few years, but do you think it's fair to not give him a full season with Aaron Rodgers, or do you think something more nefarious is going on, like what he was wearing on his arm sleeve at the London game?
I definitely think there's some more nefarious things here. First of all, the Jets are in a position where, yes, it doesn't look great for them, but it's also the first half of the season. Like, things could definitely turn around. The Jets, their schedule gets a little bit easier down the stretch. I definitely think he deserved more of a chance. I think this has more to do with his relationship with Aaron Rodgers and then Woody Johnson not trying to embarrass himself, the owner, because last year they had all these expectations for Aaron Rodgers and the Jets. This is their year. He gets hurt 3 snaps into the year. Then they go on this tear. They're 7-10. Now at this point, they're looking like they're skidding. They lose this game to the Vikings, and now at this point, they just he tries to cover some ground. He fires Robert Saleh, but I don't think Robert Saleh deserved to be the first coach to get fired. I know he mishandled the Zach Wilson situation, and I know that this situation hasn't looked great for him, but I felt like him getting fired, there was more than just football behind it, in my opinion.
Yeah, it had to be something more than football behind it because with Robert Sala, it's like, okay, what are the circumstances and why did you fire him? Was the defense the problem? Like, were they getting blown out? Sure, you get blown out by a fully healthy, outside of Saquon Barkley, San Francisco 49ers team, but the Niners are a wagon versus most teams in the league. And there's not a ton of teams that the San Francisco 49ers don't put up a lot of points against, even when they don't have a kicker there. So then you have to take a look at it like, okay, does it come back to leadership here? What's going on in the locker room? And you can take a close look at that Zach Wilson situation. That definitely was mishandled here. But I think the fact that you fired him against after you lose to the, I don't know, statistically the best team in the league at this point in the Minnesota Vikings. Like the Minnesota Vikings outside of the Kansas City Chiefs have been the most impressive team in the league, the most surprising team in the league so far. Kevin O'Connell is also an exceptional coach. Brian Flores, also an exceptional coach. And then Aaron Rodgers lost you the game because he turned the ball over 3 times. And some of those picks were absolutely horrendous. You don't think making a change at the offensive coordinator position would have been more prevalent when you look at what Nathaniel Hackett did in Denver and how bad the offense looks there, but you specifically brought in Nathaniel Hackett for Aaron Rodgers. Robert Saleh didn't decide to bring in Nathaniel Hackett. That wasn't his fault. And then he was trying to get into the quarterback room. So, okay, is this has to be a LeBron James situation where Aaron Rodgers finds out Robert Saleh gets fired. Is like, oh my god, Robert Saleh got fired. I didn't see this coming. Really?
It's like
And then you seriously use security to escort him out, and then I won't get into the political part on why Robert Saleh could have gotten fired because he was wearing a different country's flag that he was supporting because of his personal faith and belief. I won't get into that side, but that also is something that could have been at play here.
Yeah. Do you think this kind of reminds you of like a David Blatt situation where he's here and they don't quite go off to the same start as they expected, but they're not necessarily bad? And then they fire him. He can replace him with his buddy head coach. Because I feel like
No.
they're 2-3. It's not like the sky is falling. If you remember David Blatt, they had the #1 seed when they fired David Blatt. So clearly it
Yeah.
was LeBron didn't like David Blatt. And Aaron Rodgers is somebody who definitely doesn't always mesh with their head coaches. I think that's part of the reason why Mike McCarthy got fired and why he ultimately left Green Bay with Matt LaFleur. It's like, do you
Yeah.
feel like this is kind of a David Blatt situation where he kind of pushes him out?
No, because this would be like if David Blatt and the Pistons made the play-in tournament and almost made the playoffs. Like, it's a completely different scenario because you have a dysfunctional Jets organization. Before last year, they rode the ship with Zach Wilson here, and I don't think you should fire a guy until you see him play the Buffalo Bills again this season with Aaron Rodgers, with how pathetic the Buffalo Bills looked on Sunday back-to-back weeks, like versus the Cowboys. Like, you still have the chance theoretically to win your division if you can make up those two games. And David Blatt was given LeBron James, Kyrie Irving, and Kevin Love what was expected to be the best, most talented roster in the league that year. This isn't the San Francisco 49ers that Robert Saleh is coaching here. This is like if he was coaching the Detroit Pistons and then LeBron James decided to join the Detroit Pistons, knowing that they're a dysfunctional franchise. And while the Pistons, sure, they may have someone like Dylan Brooks on their team, they may have Marcus Smart on their team, they may have elite defense on this team, but they still have no help on offense. And that's not Robert Saleh's fault because the defense still looks good. Like, Sam
Yeah.
Darnold had 5 fantasy points, threw for 188 yards. You held one of the better offenses in the league that just dropped 30 on Green Bay to 23 points. That's
Yeah.
not Robert
Plus
Saleh's fault.
also, yeah, I mean, there was 14 targets Jay Jeff's way, and he caught 6 of them. So, I mean, he caught 40% of his passes, roughly. So their defense has never been the problem. In fact, Robert Saleh, he's been pretty much that defense has been built up with him. He also drafted Sauce Gardner, Will McDonald, um, and there's a bunch of other players that they've added that have gotten significantly better being in New York. So I think ultimately, I think he deserves to have another opportunity somewhere. Whether he's a DC first, but I think ultimately he'll be a head coach again. But definitely should be a defensive coordinator somewhere.
Do you think anyone wants to go to the Jets after this? Like, do you think the Jets is an appealing job for an aspiring head coach in the league who's not desperate? Or do you think someone like a Mike Vrabel, someone like a Bill Belichick, who people threw around just because it'd be funny, but I think Bill Belichick's waiting for the Bills job to open up next season, and the Cowboys, like, do you think this is a desirable job, or do you think this is a job where people still see the Jets as radioactive because Aaron Rodgers is probably going to retire in a year or two max, and also dealing with him, he's Aaron Rodgers, so you have to have a unique personality, let's say, to be your head coach and handle him.
Yeah, well, I can definitely tell you that Bill Belichick will not be going to the Jets. If you've watched him the last 25 years, he fucking hates the Jets. He was hired for them for a day, and then he immediately quit and joined the Patriots. And ever since, he's been doing the most petty bullshit to the Jets because he hates the Jets. So people putting Bill Belichick on the Jets is hilarious to me because he hates them. Like, his blood boils thinking of the New York Jets. So I don't even want to add him. If I'm Mike Vrabel, I don't even look at the Jets. The thing is the Jets, it's less about whether or not their team is good enough to contend. It's more or less about that. First of all, you're in East Rutherford, New Jersey. New Jersey is often considered one of the worst states in the country. It's cold, and their fans are absolute children. They're crybaby losers because, honestly, their fan base has been seeing nothing but losing since Joe Namath threw the rock in the 60s. That is what they're banking on is, I hope we're as good as we were in the 60s, right? So being a Jets head coach, it takes a certain specimen. The most successful one was Rex Ryan because Rex Ryan, he was a great defensive player and he built up that defense to be pretty great, but he also was a little bit of a fruitcake at some points, He
He
had
likes
some
feet.
weird little isms about him. Yeah, it's feet fetish as well. So if
Maybe
you're going to
Quentin
be a
Tarantino
Jets
then.
head coach, you got to go for someone like a Dan Campbell build or Rex Ryan, somebody who's a little goofy because at the end of the day, the Jets organization is goofy, and that's what they should be going for. But they won't. They're going to go offensive minded. They're going to pick the worst offensive minded player. Maybe Kellen Moore is their next head coach, just an offensive coordinator
Sirianni.
that was god awful, or they're going to go defensive coordinator again. But I feel like it's probably going to be like a Kellen Moore that ends up being the head coach.
Have they had a off? Okay, yeah. The only offensive-minded head coach they had was Adam Gase, right?
if you look back at their last, because keep in mind they've had 5 head coaches in 12 years. I'll pull up their history, but they had Adam Gase, and they kept Adam Gase way too long. Let's just be honest. And then they had Todd Bowles, who actually looks like a good head coach now. Now that he left the Jets, the black hole that is the Jets. And then they had
Dude, he's
Mangini.
10-6.
Yeah, he was not bad. He wasn't bad at all. And then Eric Mangini, I believe Eric Mangini was an offensive-minded head coach. It was a little
No
bit before my
defense.
time. Yeah, he was. He was offensive. Um, for the Patriots, he was a DC. Oh, he was a little bit of both. Okay, well, either way, they usually go defense. Herm Edwards is defensive, so more often than not, it's defense. But for the Jets, just stop. Just stop existing, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah. I mean, the Jets are kind of a stupid franchise. Like, where's the Jet? I don't understand. Do they even have a mascot? Like, what is their mascot? I don't understand. Like, what's the fucking green? Where does it come into play? Why do we play in New Jersey? Like, are we based off of planes? Because that's also stupid. Like, are we owned by Boeing? Like, what's the deal with the Jets? Also, your chant is pathetic. Jets, 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 Jets. You guys look stupid, but in London, you're like, oi, let him hear us. Jets, Jets.
Pathetic, dude. I want to talk about some more pathetic teams, though, because the Jets, I'll leak a little bit of the documents now. You'll see the Jets later on the show. Patriots and Dolphins. Woof, dude. I knew this game was going to be bad. You know, we talked about how bad the Dolphins or the Broncos and Jets game was last week. Well, Gerard Mayo and Mike McDaniel said, hold my beer. We're going to make another god-awful game. And that's what we got to see. Patriots and Dolphins. A lot of
Was it
field
as bad,
goals.
though?
Huh?
Was it as bad, though? 10-9, 14-10,
No,
like
not as
it
bad.
was a better finish at least.
Better finish. Was a better game, but it is a contender for one of the worst games of the year so far. Although it did cost Jacoby Brissett his job, as now Drake May will be donning the helm for the 1-4 Patriots. But this is just a battle of the bad. Even when the Dolphins win, they still look pathetic. They look just god awful. Tyreek Hill got loose a little bit, but just two of the worst teams in the league combating each other, just throwing shit at each other. One of the teams ended up winning. Cool, I guess.
I
That's what it
mean,
comes down to.
you mentioned this as a test for the New England Patriots, and you're like, all right, if they lose to the Miami Dolphins, shit's gonna get real. And also, coming into this game, there's an article that came out about a mutiny brewing against Gerard Mayo already. It's crazy what happens when you don't interview anyone else to be your head coach, and you also bring in someone from the same regime that decided it was a good idea. You know, Matt Patricia, great offensive mind. He should be our head coach. Who's the Bill O'Brien? Come out of college. We'll drag you away from Alabama, I believe is where he was at, right? As the offensive coordinator, we'll drag you away from the NCAA in your cushy job there, and you can be our offensive coordinator, right? Come out of nowhere. No, this is still the same Patriots team that decided let's roll out there with no wide receivers this year. Ramondre Stevenson forgot how to hold a football this year. So we're like, you know what? Ramondre Stevenson, no more. Top 10 in fantasy a year ago. You got hurt. Suddenly you're Stephen Ridley now. You're not even Ramondre Stevenson. You're back in the Stephen Ridley, and now we're back in the Stephen Ridley and Shane Vereen era. In New England, they're like, okay, let's start Antonio Gibson, who was second on the depth chart for the Washington Commanders last year. Solid player, but should he be your number one running back? No. And then how many fucking times can we target Hunter Henry? I don't know, but the Patriots will try and break that record over and over and over again. And then you look around and they're like, okay, maybe we can figure out how to draft receivers. No, clearly you can't. And then you decide, let's just roll it out now with Jacoby Brissett to start the year instead of Drake May. And I am honestly worried for Drake May, who is going to make his first NFL start in week 6. And unless this guy is a miracle worker, his comparison is Josh Allen. Well, Josh Allen wasn't good until year 3, and that was mostly because he didn't have wide receivers, and Drake May does not have any offensive line help, does not have a running game, and does not have any wide receivers, so I honestly feel bad for him, and I feel like he's being set up to fail here because the Patriots have looked worse each week under Gerard Mayo. Like, if you have a new head coach or you have a good head coach, you're supposed to be what? Getting better every single week. So, yeah, Patriots, you lost to Miami. Miami kind of owns the Patriots over the past few years, but you only put up 10 points, which is pretty inexcusable.
Especially, it's not like you're facing a top defense. The Dolphins' defense so far has been dog shit, and
It's shredded.
they've been getting annihilated. And then it's not like their offense is that hard to stop. And I know they only scored 15 points, but like, dog, come on, guys, do something. It feels like I'm poking a rock at this point and expecting it to run. It's like I just want you guys to score 14 points a week. And even that is a challenge for the Patriots. And now we don't expect much, right? They're starting Antonio Gibson at running back. He's not exceptional. Their wide receivers, who would have thought, suck absolute balls. It's god awful. And then we're relying on Demario Douglas of the world and the rejects of the league, the Austin Hoopers of the world, and the Keyshawn Butte, who hasn't played for anybody other than the Patriots. Really, I mean, I think he played for the. Yeah, he's just
Isn't he like a rookie
6th-round pick from 2023. It's like their offense is pathetic in so many ways, and then their offensive line can't stop a 5th grader at this point. And now they're going to bring their rookie quarterback and just shatter his confidence. Luckily, they have an easy game next week. Oh, wait, no, they don't. They face the Texans next week, who are one of the best teams in the AFC. That's the team that they hate to start off with Drake May with, where he's going to get absolutely dog walked by that team, who has Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter. So Patriots just have no idea what they're doing. They're a complete mess, and I feel bad for Drake May because he's not set up for success whatsoever.
Yeah, and you were concerned about Gerard Mayo coming into the year. Are you still concerned about Gerard Mayo? I mean, I feel like the Patriots are like, okay, we'll give you a year, but my skepticism always when you are a defensive specialist for the New England Patriots is, well, Bill Belichick pretty much runs the defense, right? And then wasn't he like giving play calling to Steve Belichick at one point? Not even Gerard Mayo?
Yeah. No, I was worried about him when he was doing his press conferences, and they were talking about all these different, whether it be like just, talking about who he's going to take at 3. He's like, at 3, we're taking a quarterback. It's like, that's good. Good logic there. And then he's like, oh, actually, just kidding. We're not taking a quarterback. We don't know. Maybe we will. And he just kept going back and forth. And then when it came time for training camp, he's like, well, Drake May's the starting quarterback. Well, actually, no. Maybe it's Jacoby Brissett. We actually really like Joe Milton. Bailey Zappi. Bailey Zappi's cool too. I don't know. Well, we're not going to start Drake May yet. We're going to start Jacoby Brissett. He doesn't know what the fuck he's doing at the end of the day. And Gerard Mayo, great linebacker for the Patriots. That's awesome. But not every former player is meant to be a head coach. And it's great that he can be a coach somewhere. But for the Patriots, immediately following the greatest coach of all time, you didn't even do an interview for anybody else when you had Mike Vrabel available, who is an exceptional head coach and has proven to be so. You also had Shane Steichens of the world and Bobby Slowik, who were also interviewing for jobs. And whether or not they took it or not, it's not the point. And you didn't even look. You're just like, nope, linebacker from our Super Bowl team. He's going to be the guy that changes ship, mind you. When you get an old head coach who spent 25 years there, you think maybe you want to change the culture, change the norms, maybe start a new era of football. Nope. We're just going to go and draft and have our Super Bowl winning linebacker from our dynasty team start a new era of the Patriots. No, move the fuck on and get somebody else, somebody who's not from fucking 2010, okay? Nope, couldn't do that. And now the Patriots are continuing to be dog shit, as you would expect.
Yeah.
So no, I'm not a Gerard Mayo guy.
Yeah, the defensive coordinator that deserved a head coaching opportunity last year was Luciano Romo. Like, you had
Mhm.
him available. What about Spags from the Chiefs? He deserves a head coaching opportunity, but like, has Gerard Mayo coached anywhere else besides the Patriots?
No, he started off, I think, as a linebackers coach
Great.
for
Yeah, he
Bill
used to
Belichick,
play
by
it.
the way, who, by the way, is the greatest defensive minded of all time.
Yeah.
It's just it's the Patriots. It's crazy to see how high a Titan can fall. How far a king can fall because they were the kings of the league, and then within 5 years they're a complete shell. They're pathetic. They're a pathetic franchise at this point, and they'll be talked about more later. But yeah, the fact that the Dolphins won does nothing for me. This was a battle of the bad, and now the Patriots will face the Jags later on. I don't think they win another game. They're pathetic in every way.
Yeah, because the Jags, Tanks Bigsby just took a energy infusion. He grabbed some ammonia. He grabbed some smelling salts. He grabbed his pre-workout, whatever you want to call it. He got hyped up on some espresso martinis before the game and move over Travis Etienne because Tank Bigsby decided that the Jacksonville Jaguars aren't going to suck anymore. Now their secondary may still be cooked. And they still might not have any help on defense, but it looks like Tanks Bigsby actually woke up. The Jacksonville Jaguars actually had a really good game versus the Indianapolis Colts, and the Colts have actually kind of dominated the Jacksonville Jaguars in Jacksonville over the past 2 years. People remember the famous it was the
Carson Wentz game.
famous Carson Wentz game. Yeah, so it's like the Colts have had their problems there, which gives me cause to pause with the Jaguars because they've kind of had the Colts number a little bit over the past few years here, and the Colts tried to do everything possible they could do to win this game, and the Jags tried to hand them this game, but they actually put up points. They actually looked like an NFL team, and they actually did not look like the worst team in football. Trevor Lawrence having the most passing yards in his career versus a Colts defense that had played pretty well over the past few weeks versus Joe Flacco, who now has the number one QBR in football. I mean, Joe Flacco is officially all the way back. No Jonathan Taylor. It doesn't matter because Alec Pierce and Josh Downs are now superstars under Flacco. But the Jaguars, are they back? Do they have a pulse, or is this just a one-off fluke where they own the Indianapolis Colts in Jacksonville?
Well, I'll tell you what. Coin toss Gabe went up to Trevor Lawrence early in the game. He says, "Wake the fuck up, Trevor Lawrence. You're supposed to be the prince as promised, and right now you're pathetic." And then ever since then, I mean, Trevor Lawrence had a great game. Um, Finally showed what he's capable of. Brian Thomas Jr. got loose for a few plays. We saw Christian Kirk get it done, and they could actually throw the ball. It's like, oh, who knew that a guy with that much talent could actually play football at a high level? So maybe we can credit Gabe Davis for potentially the Jags waking up, and I hope that's the case. I would much rather see the Jaguars be competitive and not completely a shell of themselves, and maybe they'll continue to prove it. But I honestly, this is a team that they own historically, so I'm not going to hold my breath. I think, there's a couple of easy games on their schedule coming up, but overall, I need to see more. But it did give me hope that Trevor Lawrence finally had a good game this year because it just feels like he's been sleeping at the wheel for this first month of the season. But now he's awake, so hopefully the Jaguars can start to look slightly competitive and Doug Peterson can redeem his name after I called him the most overrated head coach in the NFL the last few weeks. Maybe they can wake
Yeah,
up and maybe they won't be so pathetic.
yeah. The thing that gives me hope with Trevor, though, it's not like he's turning the ball over like crazy. Like he doesn't have that many interceptions this year. It's just our offense hasn't looked dynamic, and it's like this is a team that bet the house on Christian Kirk, brought in Gabe Davis, but if he can finally build that rapport with Brian Thomas Jr., if Tank Bigsby can like wake up and they actually have a dynamic running game, I didn't see too much faith in the defense, but the fact that they were close and competitive versus the Houston Texans last week and gave them a scare, had a chance to win that game, and now you go into a different environment, and it was a complete battle versus the Indianapolis Colts, and you have to drop close to 40 points, and Trevor Lawrence has a career high in passing yards, okay, that gives me some faith that you can get back on the wagon here and at least get competitive in an AFC that's still pretty open here. The Texans are probably going to win the division, but you can definitely make some noise down the home stretch here. And it's not like the Jaguars are allergic to slow starts. Last year, they started out hot and kind of fell off, but maybe, the first year with Doug Peterson, it took them a little bit to get going. So maybe by November, this Jaguars team can actually pick it up, because it's not for lack of talent, which is why this team has kind of just been a mystery here. So I don't think a team with this much talent can just suck for that long. Like, I don't want to see them be bad.
I mean, first year they started off slow with Doug Peterson and then got hot at the end. This last year, they started off hot and got cold at the end. So maybe they're just doing everything every other year. Like, maybe they get hot at the end of it. I'll look at their schedule and see, like, kind of how the last month ends. I mean, they'll face a team like the Titans, Jets, Raiders, Titans again, and Colts. That's the last 5 games of the season. They're kind of sandwiched. These next couple of games will be tough. They face the Bears next in London, and then they face the Patriots in London as well. So I guess it depends on how these next few weeks go, but can I see them get hot down the stretch? Sure, I can see it. But I got to see more because I still don't believe in them fully.
And then Flacco officially back. MVP Flacco back. It's such a mystery. And did you see the run that Joe Flacco had in this game? He just like rips off a 20-yard run like it was nothing in this game.
I talked highly about Kirk Cousins at the beginning of the show. I think I also should do the same when it comes to Joe Flacco, who has become one of the most fascinating careers of my time. I mean, he goes to the Ravens. He was kind of an anomaly because he had some years where he was really good. He had some years where he was really bad. And there was always that argument whether or not he was elite or not. You look at his numbers. Sometimes they went his way. Sometimes it didn't. Then he bounces around, goes to Denver, doesn't play very great. Goes to the Jets, doesn't play very great. Surprise, surprise. Someone goes to the Jets and falls off. Who would have thought? And then goes on a Flackenheimer run for the Browns. And then now in this year, he's played excellent. He hasn't even thrown a pick yet. He's got 115 QBR. He's been exceptional. Like, Joe Flacco's had a fascinating career. Also, you talk about the Super Bowl run that he had. Played the best football any quarterback's maybe ever played in a 4-game stretch. Like, Joe Flacco's had a fascinating career. And he's also, I think he's a 4-time Pro Bowler. He's a guy that is a borderline Hall of Famer, I would say.
Yeah, here's a guy. Yeah, actually has the Super Bowl on his resume to back it up too, which is cool. So yeah, the Colts in this game is like Jaguars. You always struggle against them, but definitely entertainment wise did not disappoint in this game. And the funny thing is, you know which QB has the worst QBR in the league this year?
Who?
Anthony Richardson. And now the QB with the best QBR so far this year is Joe Flacco. All on the same team. Pretty wild. And then as soon as Joe Flacco comes in, it's like Josh Downs is suddenly a factor again. I dropped him on my fantasy football team, faced him this week. Then he had 15 points against me. Alec Pierce coming out of nowhere this season looking like a dog. Michael Pittman coming alive this year again. So not a great look for Anthony Richardson. We get he's still young, still learning the game right now. But at some point, you have to elevate your wide receivers, and a fossilized quarterback can't come in and suddenly revive your entire team.
No, not at all. But then let's move to the next game here. And finally, we've talked about teams that have come out of their funk. Some teams that were, for a while, showing a bit of optimism for a team that, we've really poured on over the last several years. But the Panthers, Andy Dalton, back down to earth. They beat the Raiders, and they played competitively against the Bengals. Then they went to Chicago, and Andy Dalton had a 61 QBR, threw a pick. They had Bryce Young in the game at one point, which I was weird. That was weird.
Why?
I don't
Why?
know what they're trying to do there. Had 4 fumbles in the game. Their defense gets mollywopped. Caleb Williams finally looks like really good when he's there. I don't know. Like, the Panthers, they're back down to earth, and then the Bears. Is this a game that you feel more confidence in Caleb Williams after the fact? 'Cause it seems like he's finally starting to gel, or is it the Panthers that he's facing, and maybe take it with a grain of salt?
I think it's good because it is the Panthers, but it's still the NFL. It's still hard, and this is a game that even if you're not playing quality competition, it's going to give Caleb Williams confidence. It's going to make DJ Moore happy that he got 2 touchdowns in this game. Someone who was grumbling a little bit and looked annoyed on the sideline. It's going to make someone like D Swift happy, and also it's showing a trend where this is the Chicago Bears, I believe, longest home winning streak since 2005, something like that. So almost their longest winning streak at home in the past 20 years. So the Chicago Bears are now consistently winning at home. They're 8-0 in their last 8 home games here. So pretty spectacular stuff from the Chicago Bears. So it is one of those games where even if you're going up against an inferior team, sometimes that's the spark that it can take to just give your quarterback confidence, where you go out and it's not necessarily if you win this game, it's how you beat them. And the Chicago Bears put a beat down on the Carolina Panthers. And coming into this game, I said Andy Dalton had that good first game versus the Raiders, which at this point, looking at the Raiders, isn't looking as impressive at this point. And then went to the Bengals, put up some points, but I was like, we've seen these backup quarterbacks step in before, look really good in week one, look solid in their second start, and then absolutely fall off a cliff in the next few games here, which is what I thought with Andy Dalton, and I thought all of that was right on schedule. So I think this is a good spark for the Chicago Bears where, okay, we can take some confidence. There's something we can build off upon this, and then Caleb Williams can kind of just find a little bit of motivation out of this game where some stuff he did well, and the Bears just went out there and they beat them the way they should have, which is the good thing. They didn't toy with the Panthers in this game. It wasn't closer than they should have. Nope, it was a blowout in this game, and the Panthers never had a chance. So, like, that's all you can do if you're the Chicago Bears.
Yeah, I agree. Their defense still looked great, and I think for me that gave me hope with Caleb Williams is he's finally connecting on those deep throws where I felt like for the first few weeks he had the jitters a little bit. He'd either overthrow them or he would just not be very accurate when he did throw them down the field. But I mean, you saw him connect with DJ Moore on a big play. You saw him throw past the sticks, and I feel like that's kind of the big thing for me. It's those rookie quarterbacks that once when they start hitting those deep throws, that's when I think that you can really start to buy into them. I think that this upcoming month with the Bears, you're going to see them face teams like the Jags, the Cardinals, and the Patriots. So his confidence should continue to get better as the season progresses and get his feet a little bit more wet. Then his schedule gets a little bit harder at the end of it. But I think this next month we're going to see him really start to come into his own. So I'm really starting to buy into the Caleb Williams hype a little bit.
Yeah, and for Caleb Williams, it's not how he looks in September in this year. It's not how he looks even in early October. It's how does Caleb Williams look in late November and December? How is his progression coming along? Because it even took a little bit for CJ Stroud. That's what he told him on Sunday Night Football. Just keep your head up, keep going. And that's kind of what I've been telling people with Caleb Williams, because I thought the overreaction where, oh, Caleb Williams paints his nails, people were calling him gay, making fun of him. It's like, okay, yeah, that's fine. Good for your memes and all. But at the same time, it's like he's still a rookie quarterback figuring out one of the hardest games in the world. And it's a lot of responsibility there. So it's like, I never thought Caleb Williams was a bust. Like, if you're an NFL quarterback, sometimes you just need time. And sometimes it takes until year 2 or year 3. And the fact that people are just writing him off as a bust, like, come on. We've seen quarterbacks like Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes sat for a year. It took Lamar Jackson, even though he had a really solid first year, took him until year 2 or 3 to really hone into his skill right now, where now he looks like potentially the best quarterback in the league, not named Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, no, he looks excellent so far. So excited to see how he continues to progress. I mean, he faces the Jaguars this upcoming week in London. So let's see how he plays. But if we stay in this breath here, um, let's talk about the Browns and Commanders game because Jaden Daniels, 4-game winning streak now. He looked excellent again. He looks like he's the star of the draft so far. Rushed for 82 yards as well. Terry McLaurin got loose for a big play. And then the Browns God, I love talking about how bad the Browns are and how pathetic they are and how much I've just grown to really hate the Browns this last year. I really have, especially with Deshaun Watson. You see this play where there's 4th and goal. They desperately need a touchdown. Deshaun Watson walks off the field. Now, there's 12 men on the field. They end up just kicking a field goal. But at the end of the day, the Browns just had their tails tucked between their legs. And yeah, Browns and Commanders game. Any major thoughts on this game? Deshaun Watson fumbling and didn't look very good in this game again. But any thoughts on this game?
Yeah, it's just really disappointing how the Browns have won games this year because it'd be way better for the NFL if the Browns have not or do not win any NFL games this season. And I know you wanted to go out there, get Deshaun Watson, take a swing. Well, it's worse than the fall off that Le'Veon Bell had because at least Le'Veon Bell, could integrate into a locker room, but if I'm, a player on that team that has any moral compass, and I get you have people like Kareem Hunt, there's the Panthers player, Randy Gregory, who also Ray Rice, who have had their domestic issues before. Like, how can you integrate someone like Deshaun Watson with what he did into a locker room and have him build real rapport that you need to help motivate your team? How is that the guy you're putting out for when Deshaun Watson has specifically said, I don't run, I'm not putting it all on the line for my teammates. So why would anyone on the Cleveland Browns do the same for him? So I know you went out there, you paid him all of this money, but at this point, Deshaun Watson has not looked like a starting quarterback in the NFL. We're past the point where, oh, well, he just needs to get his legs back under him. Okay. We have not seen any flashes outside of him throwing it to Amari Cooper that he is the same Deshaun Watson in Houston. And it was similar to Russell Wilson when you take away your fastball, which is running it, which is why Deshaun Watson was so dynamic. And he was also playing with, I don't know, maybe the most dynamic version of DeAndre Hopkins we've ever seen. Like that Houston Texans team with DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson, that was D Hop at the peak of his powers. He went to Arizona, kind of fell off a little bit in Arizona, and that's where he started to decline a little bit due to age and just overall wear and tear. But that was easily the best DeAndre Hopkins we'd ever seen, which could arguably be probably the best wide receiver in the league at that point. But if you're the Cleveland Browns, there's no way you can rally around this guy when times come tough. And he's someone who's, I mean, he is a grapist for YouTube, as they like us to say instead of the R word. But overall, if you're the Browns, there's no hope, and you're back to basically the same old Browns. And if you're Kevin Stefanski, I'm looking for every way to get out of the situation
Yeah,
possible.
yeah. And the thing is like if the Broncos are going to eat Russell Wilson's contract, and it looks like even though it's early, their season looks like they have a more optimistic future with Bonyx than they do with Russell Wilson, which we all knew that it was going to come to an end inevitably. For the Browns, right? They have 2 more years of his contract before it's null and void and they can get rid of the contract. I think that at this point, if you're going to do the same thing to Russell Wilson, who I don't think was nearly as cancerous in the locker room as Deshaun Watson, everything you mentioned in your take, like completely true. Not only is he a serial grapist, not only is he the Bill Cosby of the NFL, but like just absolutely nuclear in the locker room. And they also use the comparison of Le'Veon Bell. This is a situation where he had 2 years removed from the league where he didn't play any football. He couldn't go into the facilities, couldn't practice with them. He was suspended pretty much indefinitely for one full season and then 11 games following. But at this point, like you look at like the only person you can really compare it to would be Michael Vick, who was a way better quarterback. I think Michael Vick was, he's one of the most iconic quarterbacks of the 2000s. He leaves. He wasn't particularly great in 2009. I know he was a backup, which I think helped him with that big year that he had with them in 2010. But honestly, like there's not really a comparable situation. He comes back and he's a complete cancer in the locker room. He's terrible. His quarterback play has continued to regress. He has the longest time to get the ball out of anybody in the league. He's not mobile anymore. Everything that you liked about Deshaun Watson in Houston, he's been the complete opposite in Cleveland. And if you're Ryan, if you're looking at Kevin Stefanski, you have Jameis Winston on the sidelines, who by no means is he the most talented quarterback on your team, but he's at least going to bring the team around him. He's going to be a good locker room piece, and just getting off of Deshaun Watson is going to help the Browns cleanse themselves from any bullshit that they got themselves in. Yeah, it's going to be a lot of dead cap, but it could save the franchise at this point, because keeping him any longer is just going to continue to drag them into a hole that could be impossible to get out of.
Yeah, the crazy thing is Jameis is the guy hyping up the team on the sideline. Like, he's the one giving the speech. Like, what is Deshaun Watson gonna do? Impose their will, even if they say they don't want it. Let's make them do it anyways. Like, is that his hype speech for the team?
Yeah, I mean, pretty much. It's just I'm looking at his contract. His contract is so bad. His dead cap after this year is $172 million. That's rough, man. That is most teams just that's a lot of money. That's a lot of dead cap money.
At
But
least
at
they
the end
may
of
have
the
a high
day,
draft pick this year. Like, they could get a legitimate quarterback. Do you think they'll blame it on Kevin Stefanski, who's 1-2 coach of the years, or do you think, hey, we can get Quinn Ewers this year? Let's get it done.
yeah, I think they should. I mean, the Browns are going to suck. Deshaun Watson isn't going to help them anymore. I mean, he's pretty much given up on the team countless times, saying he's not going to run, giving away on fourth down, and then just again, just not connecting with anybody on the sideline. I think this will be the best situation for him. Even if you eat him on the eat the contract and have him sitting on the sidelines. At least you have a rookie quarterback that you can eventually pay.
Yeah. Well, do you think on the flip side of this, we are a show that tries to be positive, a show of love, a show of optimism because we enjoy the NFL? The Commanders, do you think they could sweep the awards this year where they win Coach of the Year, Rookie of the Year, and MVP with Jaden Daniels taking two of those awards and Dan Quinn stepping into a seemingly toxic situation, no pun intended, because they literally had sewage in the locker room and making this a legitimate team? Do you think the Commanders are set up here to sweep the awards and win their division and potentially make a run at it in the playoffs in a weak NFC this year?
I think that you can definitely bank on Jaden Daniels as Rookie of the Year. I think Coach of the Year, Dan Quinn's right there in the conversation for it. I don't think Jaden Daniels will win MVP. I think you could see some like Derrick Henry make it. They might try to give it to Lamar again. Josh Allen puts up numbers; they're going to try to give it to them. But I think ultimately, this is a team that I think is genuinely like pretty good. Their defense is pretty solid, and Jaden Daniels is the most electric. So I do think they can win a playoff game. I don't think they make the Super Bowl, but depending on who they match up with, I think they can definitely make some noise.
Yeah, I could see, like, if Jalen Hurts can win MVP, I think Jaden Daniels can. And I mean, Derrick Henry potentially MVP, but are they really going to give it to a running back unless they break a record? Because that's what it took Adrian Peterson to do, especially when you have a two-time MVP in Lamar Jackson on that team, and then you start out 0-2, and just the expectations with the Commanders, like, that definition of valuable is what this team would look like without him. And we have seen what the Commanders look like without Jane Daniels, and it's not pretty. He's someone who's been able to stabilize this franchise and put up numbers. And then after Josh Allen's last performance, can that guy win MVP? No, I don't want to hear him in any MVP discussion again. I mean, 8 for 30? Like, no, that guy is disqualified from any MVP conversation, especially when you put up 10 points on primetime. Like, I don't want to hear it from Josh Allen. Like, every year people try and sneak him in the MVP conversation, but this year is not the year. Patrick Mahomes, maybe, because you're 5-0. Sam Darnold, maybe Justin Jefferson, potentially there. I could see also Kevin Stefanski being in Coach of the Year competition with Dan Quinn as well.
Yeah, I think yeah.
Maybe Jared Goff. Jared Goff, this could be his year for MVP.
Yeah, I think I could see Jared Goff in the conversation for it. Depending on how Kirk Cousins continues to play, we'll see if he continues to contend. But Jaden Daniels, it's amazing what a great quarterback can do for a bad franchise. Like Commanders, they've had sewage in the locker room. They've had bleachers falling on players. They've had the whole Dan Snyder nonsense that they had before, whether it's with the sexual allegations or the Redskins name that they had that everyone bitched a fit about. But as soon as they get a good quarterback, they look like they got it all figured out. And this is after, Cliff Kingsbury, who was exiled from Arizona. Dan Quinn was just sitting on the sidelines in Dallas for the last several years. They come together, and they've done an excellent job. Their defense has been decent. I mean, it hasn't been the greatest defense, but they're still working the pieces out. Their offense is the highest scoring offense in the league at this point. And this is with Brian Robinson, who's a good running back, but I wouldn't say an exceptional running back, like a league
great.
winner one. And then Terry McLaurin, who's always been really good, but maybe been a little overshadowed by his poor quarterback play that they've had for him. Austin Eckler, who everyone said was washed. It's exceptional. I mean, they don't really have that much talent on the receiver core outside of Terry McLaurin, and they're still getting it done. Zach Ertz is turning the clock back. So, I mean, exceptional job. I think Coach of the Year is definitely a situation for them that they could definitely win.
Wasn't it Cliff Kingsbury as well who led James Conner into becoming, I don't know, the league leader in touchdowns? Like, it's seeming like it's more of a Kyler Murray problem than a Cliff Kingsbury problem.
Yeah, I mean, Cliff Kingsbury, I mean, they had a high-powered offense in 2021. So,
yeah, they were 7-0, and then AJ Green forgot his job.
Catch.
Yeah,
forgot how to catch. CTE.
And then
really
it was all downhill from there.
Yeah, the CTE hit him hard. That would be a good game to pivot to, actually, the Cardinals and 49ers, because I don't know. We're talking about worst teams, right? We talked about the Dolphins and Patriots and all these other teams, but I think the real worst team in the NFL is the 49ers with the 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. For some reason, when Kyle Shanahan has a 10-plus point lead in the fourth quarter, he wets his pants. It's almost like clockwork. They have a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter, and they blow it to, of all teams, the Cardinals, a team that could barely put up any points against Detroit, just got absolutely embarrassed by the Commanders, and then blows this massive lead against the Bills, who, after their game, has not looked very spectacular. You blow a lead to the Cardinals with Michael Wilson and Greg Dortch.
Their kicker died on the field. Like, Jake Moody was not there to ice the game. Like, they were in field goal range multiple times, and sure, you couldn't get it done, but defense has a lot easier time defending you when you know that your kicker isn't there. If Jake Moody is there, this isn't a discussion. The 49ers win.
They blew a 10-point lead, and Kyle Shanahan has blown 7 10-point leads in his entire career at this point. It's something that he's continued to do time and time again, whether it's in the Super Bowl, whether it's in the playoffs, whether he's an offensive coordinator. It's something that he continues to do, and it's a problem with the 49ers. It's a problem with Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah, it's a problem with the 49ers. I give you a pass, though, when you don't have a kicker on your team. Like, that's when you get a pass, because then you can't get extra points either. And this was a 1-point game. You have to go for 2 every time. Like, you're automatically at a disadvantage. Plus, it's a division rivalry, this game. So, like, normally I would be on this train. Yeah, 49ers blow 10-point leads, but when you don't have your kicker there, you can't kick extra points. You can't kick a field goal to end this game. The Cardinals didn't deserve this win. If I'm the league, I'm like, no, you didn't actually win this game. What you did was injure Jake Moody.
Yeah, maybe we don't give them too much shit for the Cardinals game. If they hadn't already blown a lead against the Rams earlier, like 2 weeks ago, they blew this game against the Rams. And this is the difference between them being 4-1 and 2-3, which is huge, especially in a division that those murky waters with the Rams and the Cardinals, we don't know what they are. The Seahawks, we don't know either. This is a situation where there's no issues if they're 4-1. I understand, like, this game, right, Jake Moody dies, sure, can't control that. But then the Rams game on top of that as well. And then all their history with the 49ers already. And then with all their injuries, like, this isn't a game that they should lose. I understand, right, Jake Moody dies, can't control that. But this is a situation where the 49ers are in trouble at this point, especially after this loss.
Yeah, we knew they were in trouble, though, coming into the year. Everyone's like, how could you pick the 49ers to miss the playoffs on the show? That's been correct about so many things in this past. It's almost like we have the documents and can see the future. Like, this is what I've expected from the San Francisco 49ers, because the 49ers are a team that is not a great team when it comes to dealing with adversity or a Super Bowl hangover, which is kind of disappointing because Brock Purdy, I feel like, has played well this season. And a lot of people are going to lay the blame at his feet, but I think it's more of a Kyle Shanahan issue and just that aging roster issue at this point than Brock Purdy. Deebo Samuel still working his way back, but I think him and George Kittle kind of exiting their prime a little bit. Thankfully, Brandon Ayuk finally exited the bus here, but Christian McCaffrey was really the difference maker that put you back into Super Bowl contention, brought this team to the next dynamic level. And the San Francisco 49ers team, like it or not, is a lot easier to defend without the best offensive weapon in the league in Christian McCaffrey. He's right up there with Tyreek Hill. He's right up there with Patrick Mahomes as far as value on offense, and he elevated this team to the next level. And now that he's really not going to be a factor this year, and he may need new legs, and he may be the first human cyborg to play in the NFL, it's like, okay, if that can happen, sure. But this is still like relying on an older, injured roster, and your offensive line is also starting to fall apart as well. But Brock Purdy is in a tough situation. Defense is also falling apart, and you blamed the Super Bowl loss on Steve Wilks. Like, I really don't think it was a Steve Wilks issue last year, because the defense really doesn't look that much better when you blew a 10-point lead to a guy who can't see over his offensive line.
Yeah, I think it's just for me, like the Cardinals have not looked good this year. And really, it was just outside of the Rams game, they really haven't had any spectacular game. And I understand this is a division rival, but like the Cardinals team is not good. Their defense sucks, and their offense is a complete mess. So like on top of that, there like the Cardinals are just not a good. This is a team. This is a game you gotta win. I know there's always those upset games, but Kyler, I don't know what's going on with him. Like you look at his numbers, sure, maybe he looks fine, but you watch the games and you see them. Sometimes they are electric and absolutely jumps off the screen. And then most of the time, the offense is one of the worst in the league, and it makes no sense. It's like it's completely schizophrenic, it feels like, with these teams, with the Cardinals. One week, they look exceptional. Kyler Murray looks like a a Michael Vick, vintage Deshaun Watson build. And then all of a sudden, he goes back to just being completely mediocre, can't get the ball down the field. Their offense is super clunky. It's very frustrating to watch the Cardinals like this because their weapons, they have James Conner, they have Marvin Harrison, Trey McBride. They have decent enough talent on the offense, but they just have these periods of time where it's like metal scraping together.
Yeah, I mean, remember when, it came out that there was a stipulation that Kyler Murray had to watch film in his contract, and then
Yeah.
everyone's like, "That's racist." And like, is it when like putting a stipulation that you have to do your job? Like, really? What if when you're doing your training at work, they're like, "Hey, we'd like you to implement this thing on your job and you'll get a bonus." And you're like, okay. Then you just go out there and complain that you actually have to do it to get your bonus. And that's exactly what Kyler Murray did. He whined with his agent. He was embarrassed when it came out. There's a whole media campaign to be like, oh my God, how dare they put a clause that Kyler Murray actually has to study film when he's a grown adult playing video games all day. Like, really? You need to play your Call of Duty and your Fortnite. You're making 200 millions of dollars, and that's all you do with your time.
Yeah. Not a good look for them whatsoever, to say the least. But let's transition. We'll go to another AFC West or NFC West team. Let's talk about the Packers and Rams game because in this game here, we had Jordan Love starting to get back into form from his injury, had a decent game. Josh Jacobs had a big run as well, and Tucker Kraft getting it done. And then Matt Stafford had a somewhat of a come. I mean, the fourth quarter started to make some noise, but ultimately Packers prevailed in this game. Do you have any different opinions about the Packers or Rams in this game? Rams now fall to 1-4, and they're now officially last in the division. Do you have any new sentiments about the Rams? I know this was a team that you're pretty high on entering the season. They've had some injuries and they've kind of changed their course. Do you have any different sentiments about the Rams now that they are 1-4?
I have different sentiments coming about the Rams because they don't have their two best players on offense outside of Matthew Stafford. So it's like if you had Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, would they be in this situation? No, not at this moment. But yeah, when you have to rely on Tutu Atwell for some reason, who is Matt Stafford's number one option on this team, you're gonna struggle in this game. The Packers were a better team, and they came out with the victory in this game. The sentiment in this game is that Jaden Reed continues to impress, and he's quickly becoming one of the new up and coming budding stars for the Green Bay Packers. Matt LaFleur continues to impress as well, eyebrows intact, always looking great on the sideline there. But the fact that Jaden Reed, Josh Jacobs getting going here, like Jordan Love, it's weird. He seems like one of those guys who really doesn't come alive until the fourth quarter or second half. Maybe he's just getting his legs back under him after the injury. But I thought the Packers probably should have been a little bit more dominant in this game. But overall, thought it was a good win for them.
Yeah, good win for them. And the Rams are still well coached, so that plays a part too. So good win for them overall. And then let's talk about the last NFC West team, which was the Seahawks. They fell to the Giants with Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones actually had a pretty solid game statistically. Tyron Tracy had a huge game for them. And Darius Slayton got it done with no Malik Neighbors. And for the Seahawks, Geno Smith had a solid game. Kenneth Walker did absolutely nothing. Neither did Zach Charbonnet. Seahawks, I know typically when a team loses to Daniel Jones, your sentiment typically changes with them. Is this a good win for the Giants or a bad loss for the Seahawks?
I think it's a bad loss for the Seahawks because remember, I believe it was 2 years ago, they started out 3-0 and then they fell off a cliff. It was the same year where the Broncos and the Panthers and it was the Seattle Seahawks all started out 3-0 coming out of the gate, and now you've lost back-to-back games, and it came down to just technical errors in this game where you have a blocked field goal in this game. And my biggest concern about the Seattle Seahawks is, you have Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, who I think are nice running backs, but your running game can disappear at times. And then also someone who disappears at times. It's like DK Metcalf, where'd he go? Like another game where DK Metcalf was having a dominant run. DK Metcalf was playing really well this year, and I get you can have off games throughout the year, but when you needed a play, DK Metcalf was nowhere to be found here. And I think it's a new head coach. You can start out hot sometimes, and it's happened before. And then it's what happens when you face adversity, face these good teams, get into close games. And right now, I need to see the Seattle Seahawks give me more. And you can't be going out and losing to the New York Giants, who just went out there and lost to the Dallas Cowboys, who still did not look that impressive on Sunday Night Football, albeit with that hour-long rain delay, and they're playing at 1 a.m. But these are the games that you have to win to really separate yourself from the rest of the pack, especially within your division, because those divisional rival games are coming up. And now the Rams, the Cardinals, and the San Francisco 49ers are going to have more opportunities to make up ground on you, where you should be handling your business against teams like the Giants, who don't have someone like a Malik Neighbors there. And sure, you can say, well, the Giants defense is good with Brian Burns and the addition there this offseason, but you were still playing them at home. It came down to a field goal. Geno Smith was able to lead you down the field, but you let that get blocked. That's just basic coaching. You're seeing some technical errors. You're seeing DK Metcalf start to kind of drift, wander off, and then start to disappear again. So they're not separating themselves or differentiating themselves from the different Seattle Seahawks teams we've seen over the past few years. So now you don't really have any hope that they can go into the playoffs and win a game anymore. I can't see them beating a Packers team. I can't see them beating a Falcons team. And I can't see them beating a team like the Lions if they even got into the dance this season, which they definitely have the potential to, but you just have to realize it. And when you start 3-0 and you start to get worse in October, like it's not a good sign because you have the talent to score on this Giants team.
Yeah, I definitely think this was a tough loss for the Seahawks because you would think that they don't have Devin Singletary and they don't have Malik Neighbors, who have kind of been their offense all year. And you had Daniel Jones, who had a QBR above 110. Like, it doesn't really get much better. It's probably one of the better Daniel Jones games you'll ever see. And they put up points. And I know their defense, like the Giants' defense, is good to some extent, but this is a game that offensively you should have been able to shut down the Giants. They were relying on Darius Slayton and Tyron Tracy. This is a game for the Seahawks defense that has a lot of great talent. Like, they should have held the Giants down pretty easily. So I do have my worries there. This is also a team that was in the driver's seat for the division at one point, with the 49ers being banged up, with the Rams falling apart, and with the Cardinals being short. This is your chance. And it feels like, I wouldn't say it's necessarily erased, but it does give me a lot more concern for that team moving forward. So hopefully they bounce back. We see these happen around the NFL across time. They have a bad loss and they bounce back, but this was just a really ugly game overall.
Yeah, very ugly. And yeah, it doesn't give me hope that they're going to win their division, but hopefully they turn around. But it's definitely still anyone's game, and no one has. The good news is no one has really looked impressive, but I can't see anyone in this division winning a playoff game this year.
No, I can't either. Then we'll move from the NFC West to the AFC West. Raiders and Broncos. Bonyx beats the Raiders. Raiders are now 2-3. Started Gardner Minshew, then Aiden O'Connell came in. Running game still not looking overly impressive. And then Brock Bowers had a big game. On the Broncos side, Bo Nix, clean game, 19 for 27, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns. Running game somewhat got going here. Javonte Williams had a big game. Broncos have now won 3 straight. They're now winners of the last 3. So any opinions of Mr. Bo Nix and the 87-year-old man himself?
Yeah, I mean, some would say the veteran Bo Nix. I looked at him and I was like, wow, that guy looks like a veteran in the NFL. And, some people say Sean Payton's love language is just screaming at him, getting into an altercation on the sideline. Bo Nix going up to Sean Payton and said, my audible was a touchdown. Your play call was shit. And I like seeing the fire and ferocity from Bo Nix, where you never know with these rookies how much they're going to care, but the fact that he went at Sean Payton, and it seemed like that was a moment for this Denver Broncos team, and it was something real for this team where they had an explosion on the sideline, and it didn't seem like it was a dysfunctional explosion. It seemed like something that really helped change the momentum for this Broncos team. And now this is a Broncos team where people forgot what Javonte Williams was before the injury issues, and Jerry Booty is officially not a target for that team. So that seems like an addition by subtraction. And if you look at the Broncos defense over the past few years, it's still the same Broncos defense that would have made the playoffs if they just had an average, not even a slightly average offense. They just needed to have the 25th or 20th best offense in the league, and they would have made the playoffs. So Bo Nix is playing better than most people thought, exceeding expectations here. And then Sean Payton, if you like the guy, if you don't like the guy, he's still better than 75% of head coaches in the league, and those Saints defenses were still dynamic here. So I think the Broncos will give a lot of teams a run for their money here. And I think the Broncos aren't going to be a team that you'll be able to scoff at anymore. Winning 3 straight, you beat Tampa, which was a solid team. The Jets have not looked great, especially offensively, and the Raiders haven't looked great either. So I want to see them play a better team. I want to see them match up against the Kansas City Chiefs. I want to see that matchup versus the Chargers, and I definitely think they will beat the Chargers in Denver. But yeah, this is going to be a scary team for some teams to play, especially at the end of the season. And if your playoffs hopes rely on playing the Denver Broncos, who could also be fighting for a spot, it's not going to be a team you want to play in the NFL this year. And I think the Broncos look better than most people thought. And for a team that just ate Russell Wilson's contract and dead cap, you're doing as well as you could, especially with, the veteran Bonyx. And then for the Raiders, are we really going to play this 1 week it's Minshew, 1 week it's O'Connell because we don't have a good offense game the rest of the year and we traded Devontae Adams and don't have a run game or offensive line and our defense is underperforming? Is that what we're going to do the rest of the year?
I hope not, for the Raiders' sake. Like, just pick a fucking quarterback. Your team's going to suck regardless. Neither of them are starting quarterbacks. Gardner Minshew, I think, is a little better, but for the Broncos, you know what this team kind of reminds me of? And I'm interested what you think of this. Is like, they kind of remind me of the first year Patriots with Mac Jones, when Mac Jones was like fairly conservative play calling. He didn't do anything super crazy, but he just didn't turn the ball over. The running game was decent enough. Their receivers weren't overly exceptional, but their defense was really good, and that's why they ended up being, I believe, 9-8 was their record, or maybe they were 10-7. I don't think they're going to make any noise in the playoffs. There's just way too many better teams, but conservative play calling, not really turning the ball over, not really making a lot of mistakes, and their defense being good. They kind of remind me of, I believe that was the 2021 Patriots with Mac Jones. Because again, you look at the play calling for Bonyx, it's a lot of screens, it's a lot of short passing, it's a lot of quick decision making, and I feel like this team just kind of reminds me a little bit of that Patriots team way back when.
Yeah, I like that comparison. The thing I like better though is that you have an offensive head coach and the defense still looks that dynamic. So I think this team is a little bit better, but very similar. So I do like that comparison because I could see them getting shellacked in a first round matchup for sure, similar to the Patriots. But yeah, I definitely like that comparison for this Broncos team.
Yeah, I think they're going to be they're going to be a tough out. And then let's see, we haven't talked about the Bills and
Game of the
Texans
week.
game. Oh, actually, yeah,
Oh, the Bills and Texans. Yeah, let's
let's
go.
get it out of the way. Josh Allen, 9 of 30, 130 yards. Running game, James Cook does his thing. And then on the other side, the Texans, Cam Akers, 9 carries, 42 yards. Stephon Diggs has more receiving yards than the entire Buffalo Bills receiving core, wide receivers. And then the Texans win. The score looks a little bit more deceiving in my mind. I feel like the Texans just dominated throughout. And the Bills, Josh Allen, like 9 of 30, 9 of 30. We just saw him get shellacked by the Ravens. And then the Texans game was like, okay, you lose to Lamar, you lose to that defense, sure. The Texans, I like the Texans defense, but 9 of 30 when you're a top 5 quarterback, like, dog, what are you doing, dude? And then the guy that broke up with you this offseason has more receiving yards than your entire receiver core. Ouch, dude. Take the L, take a little bubble bath, move on to the next game. Because, good God, what a terrible game for Josh Allen. And then victory lap for Stephon Diggs, who, was clapping Cardi B's and a bunch of other hoes' cheeks over his time in Buffalo.
Yeah, and this was the guy like, oh, yeah, I'm such a hater of Josh Allen after he scored 47 on the Jaguars. And I feel like at this point, Josh Allen is just the Kramer of the NFL. It's like
Oh, no.
Jim Kramer. Like, as soon as he says something's going to go up, it crashes. As soon as someone says it's going to go down, then he overachieves. Like, when everyone was finally off the Josh Allen bandwagon last season, that's when the Bills pulled it together, and then everyone picked the Buffalo Bills to beat the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, a majority of a panel actually picked them. Like, oh, it's the first game he's at home. I think he'll finally get it done this time. Whereas the Kansas City Chiefs, wrong. It's like he is the Jim Kramer of the NFL, where you had the absolute insanity of ESPN, where Greeny's like, if you don't think Josh Allen's the best player in the league, you can't talk about football. Rex Ryan naming Josh Allen, and I know he coached the Bills, but Rex Ryan naming Josh Allen the best player in the league. I mean, it's absolutely comical. It's like, no, you guys should not be able to talk about football anymore because you repeatedly fall for the stupid trap in September of Josh Allen playing really well, and you're saying, oh, if you don't think he's the best player in the league, you shouldn't talk about football. Really? You shouldn't have a job. How do you get paid hundreds of thousands, sometimes millions of dollars to spew this propaganda for the Buffalo Bills of all teams who played the Cardinals, who look like a bottom team in the NFL, played the Jaguars, who literally just woke up and historically beat the Indianapolis Colts in Jacksonville and have that team's number. And it's like, you destroyed the Dolphins, and Tua maybe ended his career. They look like a bottom team in the NFL. If you look at the teams that the Buffalo Bills beat, it's really not that impressive. And the fact that people were talking them up so much is absolutely laughable. The media has no objectivity. Yeah, 47 points versus a team that just, gave up over what? 30 points to Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco, I mean, you want to talk about people who look like superheroes? Suddenly, Joe Flacco looked like he could run like Josh Allen. He himself looked like a superhero versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Does that mean he's the best player in the league? Absolutely not. Does that mean Joe Flacco's a top 5 quarterback? Absolutely not. And while Josh Allen is definitely a top 5 quarterback, it's looking closer to 4 or 5 because Lamar Jackson has been more impressive this season. Jared Goff has been more impressive this season. Kirk Cousins and Patrick Mahomes have also been more impressive. Going 9 for 30 is absolutely insane. And the touchdown that you did have to Keon Coleman, it was just a play that on 4th down, Keon Coleman just turned it into nothing. And then the Buffalo Bills as well. What have I repeatedly said on this, coach? They have no IQ within the game at all to adjust, and Sean McDermott cannot make in-game adjustments and does not have situational awareness. And what does this team do in their end zone? Josh Allen almost throws 2 interceptions, and all you need to do is get the game to overtime, and then you can't even pick up any extra yards, and your punter is literally lining up out of bounds to start the play. I mean, this is absolutely inexcusable stuff for a team that people are like, oh yeah, they're back. It's like, no, let's wait for the season to play out a little bit. Josh Allen is not the MVP yet. We still have a full season to play here. We've only played 3 games and right on schedule. You only put up 10 points, and then Josh Allen has one of the worst games I've ever seen from him, where he looked worse than Daniel Jones has looked at any point this season.
Yeah, this was an ugly game, no doubt about it. What gives me hope about the Bills is that they're going to get 6 wins this year. They're going to beat the Jets, and they're going to beat the Patriots, and they're going to beat the Dolphins. They already beat the Jags. Their schedule, they're going to beat the Titans of the world, and that's going to be enough for them to potentially make the playoffs. I think they're going to be like what we mentioned, 8-9, 9-8, simply because their division's so bad. And it's kind of an injustice to the rest of the league, but yeah, I mean, at this point, at this rate, right, when they face the Chiefs, will they win? We don't know. And Detroit should probably shellac them when they face them. It's like, are they just going to be that team like how the Dolphins and Cowboys were last year, where when they face real competition, they get absolutely abused? Because so far through the first 5 weeks, they beat up on bottom feeders, and then when they face 2 contenders, two true contenders in the AFC, they get absolutely embarrassed. And I understand the score was close for the Texans game, but it was embarrassing. Josh Allen completed 30% of his passes. He had Tim Tebow numbers, for fuck's sake. That's not good.
Scott Hansen was literally losing his mind on red zone. He's like, what are they doing? All you need to do is get to overtime, and guess what? As bad as you played, you kind of seize momentum at that point in the game. So, I don't know. Just run the ball a little bit. And James Cook, I mean, he had a nice run in September, but it doesn't look like he's the guy. People are finally picking up on what the Buffalo Bills are doing here, and you're going to struggle when you still don't have elite receiver talent on that end for the Buffalo Bills. And Nico Collins also went down this game, who had 2 catches, had a touchdown for the Houston Texans, and they kind of coasted from there. But the fact, I think this is Sean McDermott's last year, I think, is also gonna come true, especially if you can't beat real competition. Then I don't agree that they're gonna beat the Jets this year, because I've seen the Jets beat the Bills in fluky ways, and I think the Jets are one of those teams that are always just gonna get a win somehow off of the Buffalo Bills. And I think this year with Aaron Rodgers, the Jets can get a game off the Bills.
I still
I
think
think
the
they can do it.
I still think the Bills are probably going to win the division, though. Unless the Jets
For
really
sure.
turn things around.
Well, it's a bad
It's,
division, so they should win.
yeah, it is a bet. It's probably the worst division he'll ever face. But I'm tired of the negativity. Let's talk about some positive shit. How about maybe the game of the year so far in the Ravens and Bengals, right? We had Lamar Jackson, 4 touchdowns, 350 yards. Joe Burrow, 5 touchdowns, 400 yards. We had Derrick Henry have a massive run again. We had Zay Flowers have a big game. We had Jamar Chase have another 200-yard receiving game. No offense. I'm sorry, no defenses whatsoever between the both of them, but good God, was this a great game. Overtime. And we got to see the battle of Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow yet again. It's been a couple of years since we saw them just because of the injuries that have caused, but when they face each other, it's always electric, and Lamar Jackson wins this round. Um, what a game by both of these guys. And now the Ravens officially come back, and now the Bengals are now 1-4.
Yeah, Bengals are 1-4, and I stick by my comparison that I had for them a couple weeks ago, where I said this Bengals team reminds me of those Drew Brees teams that didn't really have a defense, but Drew Brees was putting up the best numbers in the league at that point. And with the Bengals, I don't really see their defense turning around, because that's what has led them early on in the season before. Maybe you turn it around under Lou Anarumo, but you are pretty far behind at this point and you lose your division. It's not out of sight yet, but this was definitely a game that got away from you. This was not a game you should have lost, and I don't understand why Zach Taylor suddenly got timid in overtime when Joe Burrow clearly had the hot hand in this game. Jamar Chase had the hot hand in this game, and T. Higgins had the hot hand in this game, and then they didn't really throw the ball at all in overtime, and the Ravens were coming back. They were down 10 points with 5 minutes left to go and were able to come back and beat you in this game. This was a inexcusable loss for the Bengals, and it's like, you want to talk about positivity? Like, sure, there is like a lot of positivity for the Ravens in this game, because you were able to come back, win this game. Seems like they play better from behind, because they kind of tend to coast when they have a lead here. But for the Bengals, not a lot of positivity when your offense plays as well as it possibly could versus one of the best defenses in the league. Joe Burrow has the best numbers of any quarterback in those league. He leads the league in touchdowns, only has 2 interceptions, 12 touchdowns to 2 picks, and it's still not enough when Jamar Chase goes that nuclear. I mean, it's going to be a long season for the Cincinnati Bengals, because if you can't stop anybody, it's going to be tough to win games.
Yeah, their defense is god awful. And it's unfortunate because I feel like if they're able to turn it around, and even if Joe Burrow ends up being like 9-8, this is a serious MVP conversation. I mean, right now he is sixth in passing yards, but if he continues on the path he's on, he's going to have potentially 4,800 yards, 42 touchdowns, 7 picks. Like, he's having such a great season already. And if it ultimately comes down to a bad defense, that's going to be a disgrace, because I think that this could be an MVP season for him if they could just get a stop on the other side, which is really unfortunate for the Bengals. They can't afford another loss for a while. They need to come back. They got to win the next 3 straight, or else their season's basically over at that point. They can't fall into the hole that they're in, especially in a competitive AFC like this.
Yeah, they have to win the rest of the games pretty much in their division to win this game. And I still think they can make the playoffs, but it's definitely, they're not making it easy on themselves to do at this point. But this Bengals team also probably looks like the best offense that they've ever had under Joe Burrow. I think this is the best running duo that they've had with Zach Moss in this lineup. And then also having that third wide receiver in the Romanian Rocket there, and then Mike Gesicki at tight end. I feel like he's been better than kind of the tight ends they've had in the past, where you can pretty much fill them in. Like you had Drew Sample last year, you had Hayden Hurst. Haven't really had any spectacular names at tight end, but Mike Gesicki has played well for you. So I think overall, this is probably still the best Bengals offense we have seen, which is kind of the disappointing part with it. But you can't help but fall in love with this Ravens offense with Derrick Henry stepping up now. If you get Devontae Adams, and now you have a third tight end pop up in here. I'm blanking on his name, but number 88 played really well in this game. We finally got a Mark Andrews sighting as well. Zay Flowers stepping up in this game. For some reason, Nelson Aguilar is still there, but Lamar Jackson looks like he's also taken another step forward this season and has gotten better. And he was accurate. You're down 10 points, and this was another MVP performance from him, and him and Derrick Henry might be the most dynamic duo in the league this year so far.
Yeah, this team is insane, especially you start 0-2, and I wasn't overly worried about them going 0-2, but Derrick
No.
Henry has been exceptional for them. You talk about the Ravens, like it's kind of been, if you look at Lamar's career, it's been a lot of him mostly being the main running source for this team. And I know they've had like the Justice Hills of the world, and they've had the J.K. Dobbins and whatnot, Gus Edwards, but now they finally have a running back who is a generational running back. And adding him to the fold puts a lot of pressure off of Lamar to run. You've seen him run a lot less than he has in years past, and really just kind of focus on being the passer that he's become. And made some great reads, was accurate in this game, pushed the ball down the field. Adding Derrick Henry takes a lot of pressure off of Lamar Jackson. And I think ultimately this is a team that I think can beat the Chiefs, although I still have the Chiefs as favorites. But I feel like they might be the biggest threats, just based on what I've seen from the Texans so far this year, and then the Bengals being a complete mess so far.
Yeah, no, it could be their year, especially with the Chiefs having injury issues. And that game that they lost really did come down to that Zay Flowers fumble. So we'll see. Chiefs defense still does look dynamic. Juju Smith-Schuster having a surreal performance versus the New Orleans Saints on Monday Night Football. But something that does also add pressure to a team is you hopping on the Steelers bandwagon. Please get off, because ever since you've gotten on, they've lost 2 straight. This is like
Good.
coming
My
into the
evil plans
year,
worked.
you had the right mentality, didn't like the Steelers, and then suddenly you hop on the bandwagon, and ever since then, they've lost 2 straight games. So I'm begging you, please get off the bandwagon.
No, I like it. I like watching the Steelers crumble. But I mean, yeah, they came back down to earth a little bit. I mean, running backs didn't get anything done. Justin Fields kind of went back down to earth a little bit against the Cowboys here. And George Pickens just not really running full routes against the Cowboys either. Granted, I know that this was a weird game. I was flying for most of this game, so I missed the early parts of this game, but it was delayed, so that helped me a lot. So I got to see the second half. But this
Didn't have it
game,
on the plane.
I was watching it on the plane, but the game was
Okay.
flying in. I saw like the last hour on broken internet, so I got to see a little bit. But second half, I got to see, thankfully. But yeah, Steelers. I'm going to stay on their bandwagon because I do like to see them, kind of go back down to earth a little bit. Maybe I'll still rock with them against the Raiders because it's funny. Steelers deserve. I think Steelers fans deserve this, honestly.
they
Of the
deserve. They deserve what?
I'm the hex on their team, and if I'm the person that drags them down, good. I'll be that guy.
Yeah, you're the person that drags them down. So unfair. But do you think this game gives us, starts the conversation that Russell Wilson is going to come into the fold with the performance that we saw from Justin Fields?
I don't know. I still feel like Justin Fields this season has still played pretty well. In this game, like, I don't know, late game, kind of a weird situation with the delay. Wasn't a great game overall, but I still think that, sure, you can put Russell Wilson in, but I don't think he's going to be better than what Justin Fields has offered you so far.
Yeah, I mean, the problem, though, is like the turnover ratio in this game. And Dak Prescott, for the first like 3.5 quarters of this game, played absolutely horrendous.
Yep.
football in this game. Some of the dumbest turnovers I've ever seen. And the Cowboys probably should have won this game like 31-13. If not, they should have probably dropped 35 if it wasn't for Dak, because he threw one of the weirdest interceptions I've seen just in the end zone. And then you have a fumble in the red zone. So you basically have two crucial turnovers in this game. So if you at least settle for field goals, like the Cowboys should have at least had 29 points in this game versus the Steelers defense. And then their offense really couldn't get anything going at all. And you've kind of sputtered the first part of the season. You got it going a little bit against the Colts, but we just saw what the Jacksonville Jaguars just did versus the Indianapolis Colts. But overall, the Steelers offense hasn't looked that impressive. So I think you can make the case. So like, let's at least see what it looks like with Russell Wilson here. And it's like, it's another team that started out 3-0 and has continued to lose games. And I know with Mike Tomlin, they'll have a winning record, but I definitely think the Ravens will take the division. But like, this is still a game where I feel like you gave it away and the Cowboys were begging you to win this game, especially like the fumble that Rico Doyle almost gave away in this game. And then Dak Prescott, credit to him, gets down the field and gets the touchdown. But also, the Cowboys should have never been in that position. And this is a game that they should have easily won on Sunday Night Football with how they played. If it wasn't for those terrible turnovers from Dak Prescott, and it's still concerning that he had those turnovers, but you end up winning the game. But for the Steelers, it's like you still haven't put up points. They're still, as you would call them, the Guantanamo Bay Steelers outside of one game.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a game that does make me worry a little bit. I think with Russell Wilson, you'll probably get a better passing experience. Like, I think ultimately their passing offense should be a little bit better because Justin Fields, he has flashes of being a great passer, or I should say a good passer, not great, but
Passable.
at the end of the day, I think ultimately what Justin Fields brings you is mobility and kind of helps with the running game being as bad as it's been for most of their time. But Russell Wilson will probably help the passing offense. So I think you lose something, but you gain something. So for the Steelers, it really depends on what kind of offense they want to operate with Arthur Smith. If they want to be more of like a check down team, which is what they've been most likely going to be with Russell Wilson. Justin Fields, I think, gives them a little bit more dynamicness to their team. But they're very close to being back to being the Guantanamo Bay Steelers. Like, this game was not exceptional for the Steelers. However, if I am the curse that is for the Steelers, it will make me smile. So they get another week of me being their fan. And if they fall off the wagon, then maybe they'll come back around.
No, they are still the Guantanamo Bay Steelers. Like, what game have they, like, has their offense looked impressive? Like, oh, the Colts got a lead and then played prevent defense and your offense looked good. You scored against the Chargers. Wow, how impressive. The Chargers of all teams.
Chargers defense was looking pretty good at that time, though.
Against who? The Raiders?
They had a good. I mean, the first three, they just played who was in front of them, and they looked good.
Yeah, that's all you can do.
Yeah.
I mean, Steelers almost lost to the Broncos.
Yeah, that wasn't a pretty game. But, I mean, Justin Fields, I mean, if you look at the Chargers game, he threw for 245 yards, was accurate in that game. So, like, there's things to like about that game. They only put up 20 points, but he looked pretty well. For what we've seen from Justin Fields in Chicago, I still think that this is an improved Justin Fields.
Yeah, I mean, Desmond Ridder also looked good to start the season under Arthur Smith last year and then fell off a cliff as well. So,
nah, I think he looks better than Desmond Ridder, though. Desmond Ridder was not that good.
He looked pretty good in like the first few weeks last year. Like the game against Green Bay, Desmond Ridder showed some flashes in that game.
Yeah, well, they face the Raiders next week, so they should look great against the Raiders. Then they face the Jets and New York. They got to be in New York for back-to-back weeks. That's tough. Poor things. They have to be in East Rutherford. But we'll see. I mean, this Raiders game, I think, is a big thing. Raiders defense is Swiss cheese, so if they don't put up points, then maybe it is maybe Guantanamo Bay returns. We don't know.
Maybe it returns. Does this change your opinion at all with the Cowboys? There's like,
No,
Still the
no,
same.
because
Same
they were
Cowboys.
they were asleep at the wheel for 3.5 quarters. They put up 6 points in the first half. And I understand their offense isn't nearly as dynamic as it was last year, but why does it feel like every single game with the Cowboys, they are asleep for 3 quarters of the game? And then, yeah, maybe you could say, like, oh, well, maybe that's impressive on why they keep winning these games. No, wake up, play in the first quarter, play in the second quarter. Because the reason why you haven't won a playoff game since VHS tapes is because your team does the same thing in the playoff games, and you do absolutely nothing. Now, you can get away with it when you're facing the Guantanamo Bay Steelers and you're facing the Panthers of the world, and you're facing the Patriots. When you face real teams, you just embarrass yourself, like the Packers, like I can listen to a bunch of other teams, but I won't because, time restraints. But the Cowboys, no. This doesn't impress me whatsoever. Congratulations. Rico Doidle had a good game. You're still Rico Doidle. You're still not a good running back.
I mean, he had 87 yards, had a great game, came alive. You don't think Rico Dordal looked better than Tony Pollard did last year?
I'm not sold.
Vegas was sold preseason on Rico Doidal. We
Vegas
know
likes
that
Rico
much.
Doidle.
Would they have them at like 11, 10, 11 wins? Like
They
crazy.
had him at like
Without a
10
run
and a
game?
half. They had one of
10
the
and a half,
highest
yeah.
over-unders, which was absurd to me. Nonetheless. Well, let's talk about the last game of the week. Saints and Chiefs. Chiefs are now 5-0. Patrick Mahomes, 330 yards. Kareem Hunt had his first 100-yard game in, I believe, over 4 years. He had one 100-yard game with the Browns in his 5 years here. First game back with the Chiefs, he has 100 yards. Juju Smith-Schuster comes alive from the graves, and the Chiefs get it done. And then the Saints, 13 points. Alvin Kamara does nothing. Derek Carr gets hurt in this game. Yeah, Chiefs and Saints kind of goes the way I felt it was expected to go. Any overwhelming thoughts on this game?
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like they were trying to get Travis Kelsey involved early, and like he had a solid game, 9 catches, 70 yards. But for this, it just seems like the Saints have like fell all the way off. And this game, I didn't feel confident that they were suddenly going to be motivated again to win, especially on prime time versus Patrick Mahomes. I just didn't think he was going to let that happen. But honestly, I think this was the best that the Chiefs offense has looked all season, and it's kind of odd because you didn't have Xavier Worthy there, but your rushing attack looks solid even without Pacheco. Kareem Hunt is still a very serviceable running back, and he was good last year with the Cleveland Browns. And then Patrick Mahomes, like, I mean, he had an interception in this game, but overall, like 331 yards. This was probably the most dynamic he looked all season. He was able to run in this game. Saints had to pull some magic throwing to offensive linemen to get touchdowns in this game, but overall, just thought this was another confirmation that the Saints might be dead. I think they're officially the third best team in that division behind the Bucks and the Falcons. I don't think they're as good as either of those teams, and I think with Travis Kelsey earlier in the season, everyone was freaking out about Travis Kelsey, but literally I could care less if Travis Kelsey doesn't have any catches in the regular season. It's what does he do in the playoffs? And I know he's going to show up, going to have a crucial catch in the playoffs when it actually matters. Like what these players who get to back to back to back playoff runs and Super Bowls, like they don't care about September, but year after year, people constantly freak out like, oh my God, Travis Kelsey is washed and over the hill. It's like, no, it's September. He just doesn't care, and the Chiefs are bored and they're still undefeated. Like, I never thought Travis Kelsey was washed. Maybe he lost a step, sure, but he's still arguably the one of the best tight ends in football this year, especially in a year that's pretty thin at the tight end position as far as dynamic players jumping off the screen. It's like everyone just hates him because of Taylor Swift. It's like, okay, that's fine. Like we all know about the Swifties. They're psycho, they're crazy. Bill Belichick is sick of them. Like Joe Buck's daughters warned him about making jokes about them, and like sure, fine. You get offended by a singer being shown for 5 seconds. Like, that's your prerogative. Whatever. But Travis Kelsey's not washed. He still has another good year left in him.
Yeah, I agree. I think also, yeah, everything you mentioned there. I also think it's funny that they talk about how much the Chiefs look bad this year, but they're still 5-0. They lost Isaiah Pacheco, they lost Rashee Rice, and they got it done with Juju Smith-Schuster, who looked like he was done in the league completely. Kareem Hunt, who looked like he was done in the league completely. Nobody picked him up. They pick him up. 100-yard game, 100-yard receiving game. Like, this is a situation where I know we're going to continuously compare them to the 2000s Patriots, but this is right out of their playbook. Them acquiring somebody that nobody cares about, who's washed over the hill, whether it's the Corey Dillons of the world. I know Randy Moss is obviously an all-time great wide receiver, but when they acquired him, similar idea. They felt like he was over the hill as well, and here they are. They step right back in. Juju Smith-Schuster, it's like he didn't miss a beat whatsoever. With all their injuries that they've had, and they're still 5-0, and I still think that you look at the rest of their schedule, like they're better than every team, and I don't think it's really close. I think you really look like the Texans game might be a challenge for them in Week 16, but ultimately, this is a team that is a juggernaut. They should be the best team in the league, and I don't really think it's really close at this point. They're above everybody else, and I think they are well on pace to having that three-peat potentially.
Yeah, I mean, they're still on pace for it, and they looked the same last year. They looked the same the year before, and they looked the same to start the year before that. The only difference is their defense is what's carrying them, and their defense is still probably the best defense in the league at this moment. I mean, that's what's been carrying them, and then all it takes is a few drives from Patrick Mahomes. Like, it's literally the same exact formula as the Patriots. And they let go of Tyreek Hill, and then you bring back players like Juju who are making an impact. It's like people who freak out about the Chiefs, like, okay, you're complaining that they're undefeated, but you just didn't like how they won. It's like, no, a win is a win in the NFL. But people just are ready for them to suck.
Yeah, and they won by
Just
2
fatigue.
touchdowns. They shut down the Saints, and they got it going with 2 guys who were coming off the waiver wire. Like, they're fine. I'm not worried about the Chiefs.
Yeah, and even if they don't win the Super Bowl this year, so what? Patrick Mahomes still has won 3, and he might win the next 2 after that.
Yeah, the Chiefs are going to be good for a very long time. So just enjoy it and shut the fuck up, to be completely honest. The reason why people have such a beef with Patrick Mahomes this year specifically is because they took him in fantasy. That's literally why. His numbers, like, yeah, sure, maybe he hasn't had 1,000,000 points overall, but at the end of the day, he's Patrick Mahomes. You shouldn't have taken him that high anyways. He's not a fantasy quarterback at this point. What is what it is.
He's still the fastest quarterback to reach 30,000 yards, yes?
Yep. And he still has the most wins, most touchdowns. Like, doesn't really matter. He just wants to win. So, yeah, Chiefs game, they took care of business. They have a bye week now. So that gives them some rest going into the bye week. They face the Niners next, so that'll be fun.
Yeah, who won and lost versus the bye week this week?
Oh, let's see. So let's review. So the Lions, they had a bye. You think they won that? I think they won the bye week for sure. They look good.
A lot of grit that bye week, a lot of coffee that week, a lot of re-energization. I think the Lions definitely won that bye week for sure.
The Chargers, they had a really big lead against them, 27-0 against the bye week. But then the bye week, even though they threw 4 interceptions in the first half, they still managed to win that game 28-27. So very, really upsetting loss in heartbreaking fashion, as you couldn't expect from the Chargers losing the bye week. The Eagles. How did the Eagles fare in the bye week?
Disappointment and lifeless. Absolutely. I mean, you want to talk about a team that can absolutely ruin a bye week. You have a week off, but somehow, like, you forget they even exist. Not even there. Were they missed? Absolutely not. Did I miss the Lions? Yes. Did I miss the Chargers? No, not really. Did I miss the Titans? A little bit, yeah. Did I miss the Eagles? Absolutely not. And I would be fine if the Eagles, frankly, did not play another game this season.
Well, it'd be a hell of a lot less disappointing that way. I did miss the Titans. I'm going to be honest with you. There was some funny turnover that we missed from Will Levis. So I did miss them.
The Titans are the funniest bad team potentially in NFL history, to be honest.
Who needs to be on that team? Jameis Winston. Get Jameis
They
Winston on the Titans.
They don't need 2 of them at that time, but just like Brian Callahan, like, being the coach of that team, clearly hating Will Levis. Mason Rudolph stepping in, playing lights out when he came in for them on Monday Night Football versus Miami. But honestly, I don't think Tennessee lost versus the bye week necessarily. So I'll give them a tie. I think they tied with the bye week this week.
Beautiful. Well, we have now previewed, or I should say reacted to, every game that happened in week 5 of the NFL, including the bye weeks, something you don't see everywhere on the interwebs. But there is one thing we have yet to go over, which is the highlight of the internet, the highlight of the reason why you have a phone, the reason why we do this show each and every week. We have the worst top 5 according to the Brickyards documents. You have the documents on hand. Pass them over here as I unleash the 5 worst teams in the NFL according to the Brickyard. Now, before I start, let's talk about teams that will not be on this list this week, whether it's because they played well or there's just other teams that disappointed me less. Let's start with the Jaguars. Jaguars, we ripped them to shreds the last 2 weeks. Actually, this whole month of football, because you started 0-4. Trevor Lawrence forgot how to play football, but guess what? CoinDOS Gabe came up to him and said, hey, dude, what the fuck is your problem? How about you learn how to play football in the NFL? They woke up. They beat the Colts. So they are not on the worst top 5 list. And then we have the Giants, East Rutherford Giants, beating the Seahawks. Danny Dimes had a QBR over 100. No Malik Neighbors, holding Kung Fu Kenny to 19 yards, scoring twice as many points as we're accustomed to them seeing. I'll take that. So the Giants and the Jaguars, you will not be seen on the worst top 5 list. Now, at number 5, I have the 49ers with a 10-point lead in the fourth quarter. This is the 7th time in Kyle Shanahan's coaching career that he has blown a 10-point fourth quarter lead. And that includes not 1, not 2, 3 Super Bowls. This man could have 3 Super Bowls if he could just hold a 10-point lead. So the 49ers, hilariously enough, I will put them at number 5 simply because they blew yet another 10-point fourth quarter lead. Number 4, back like a bad rash. You thought that they might have been extinct from this list, but unfortunately, there's a rash, and yes, that rash is red. And we're, of course, talking about the Carolina Panthers. Back like they never left. Back to earth they go, and back on the worst top 5 list, getting absolutely decimated by Femboy Caleb and the Chicago Bears. Then, a team that will be actually pinned to the worst top 5 list for the foreseeable future, that is none other than the Cleveland Browns. How could I forget about them? I might even probably put them higher, but there's 2 teams that I want to rip to shreds. So Cleveland Browns, Deshaun Watson walking off of a 4th and goal, having the worst contract in the league, being the worst starting quarterback in leagues, and also having the worst contract in the league. Cleveland Browns just each and every week looking more and more pathetic. The Browns are the worst top 5 as well. Number 2, I actually have 2 teams on this list because I couldn't decide which turd deserved to be shown in the spotlight more. You have a turd and a turd with sprinkles. That being the Dolphins and the Patriots. And they witnessed it live on television for our children to see, which I think is something that the FCC should really step in and discuss because that's something that is not good for our eyesight. It's not good for the sound. We should not have to bear witness to Tyler Huntley and Jacoby Brissett. Patriots are now moving forward with Drake May. Maybe they leave the top 5, but I'm not too sure. And then the Dolphins, it's literally just shit with sprinkles. Yes, you have Tyreek Hill. Yes, you have Jalen Waddle. But what do you have to show for it? A measly win against the New England Patriots, who are also the 2nd worst team, according to the Brickyard. At number 1, how could I not put this team here after what they just did this week? Yes, that's right. I have the New York Jets as the number 1 team. That's right. I understand they're 2-3. I understand they have Aaron Rodgers and the great defense. But the New York Jets deserve to be bullied this week for a number of reasons. For one thing, they are the graveyard of the NFL. You have LaDainian Tomlinson, lost soul, last seen in New York. We have Brandon Marshall, last seen in New York, dying in New York. Eric Decker, Brett Favre. You almost killed Sam Darnold's career, who's looking like an MVP candidate. The list goes on. Matt Forte, Frank Gore, who played for 75 years. Last stop, New York. The list goes on. You go to New York, you go there to die. And it looks like Brett and Aaron Rodgers, It looks like he's going there to die, unfortunately. For the Jets, they fire Mr. Clean, who I don't think was the sole reason of why you have been underperforming. But the Jets, they are just known to embarrass themselves, bending their knee to Aaron Rodgers, who is now going to be 41 in December. Just a level of patheticness that deserves to be shown on live television. I'm going to have the Jets at number 1 as the worst team according to the Brickyard.
Wow. Definitely a change of pace here. Definitely some teams left off the list. Did I miss Cleveland? Was I asleep?
Yeah, Cleveland's on the list. They're number 3.
Number 3. Yeah, but Patriots and Dolphins, I like it. They're definitely in the same spot, and especially Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill are definitely those sprinkles there, just being wasted in Miami there. But Jets, probably, how long are they going to be pinned here for at number 1?
I don't know if they'll stay at number 1, but if they keep looking pathetic and embarrassing themselves, they'll probably stay on the list. If Cleveland can stay on the list, so can they.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing redeemable about it, so I like it. Another fantastic list here from the Brickyard. Another fantastic recap, but overall, very solid list, especially the San Francisco 49ers with the 10-point lead. I mean, what is happening? We don't know. Why can't Kyle Shanahan keep a 10-point lead when he's being praised as this running guru, but when he needs to run the ball, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, at this point, when they have a 10-point lead, I'm nervous, which should not be the case with the 49ers. They should be able to hold the lead, especially because they have, I don't know, usually the best running team in all of the league, and that's all you need to do in those 10-point deficits and 10-point leads. So, I don't know. Not in love with that team, but they should leave the list as long as they win next week, if all goes well. As long as they don't blow any more leads.
Yeah, as long as they don't have a 10-point lead.
Yeah. 20-point lead or nothing. But yeah, that is our worst top 5. That is our week 5 preview. We will be back here tomorrow to preview week 6 of the NFL, already almost halfway through the season already, so you won't want to miss it here. Most important message of all before we leave, however, stay brick. That was actually one of our better stay bricks.
Yeah.